Hi, I'm Erika of the Knit Kind podcast and Grapefruit and Gardenia Designs. You can find me on Ravelry as Knitty Elf 40, Knitty Elf ELF 40. And if you enjoy this video or any of my other episodes of Knit Kind or the tutorials or anything I put up, it would be great if you would like or subscribe, and it helps other knitters and fiber artists and people who just appreciate hearing the stories find this podcast. So this one isn't exactly planned, but in this season when we are so hectic and busy and running around and often things get lost that I feel are most important, I felt compelled this morning to take a little time out of my schedule, which has been all over the place this week, and record a message that I'm going to call Kindness with a Side of Knitting. So earlier this week, I recorded a guest appearance on another podcast, which will come out in January, and I'll let you know about it then. But one of the things I was asked about was this podcast and Knit Kind, and what did that mean exactly? And one of the things I talked very briefly about was just that we went through a pandemic together as a world, and we lost some of those in-person connections we had. And for me, that's where a lot of kindness showed up. And it was wonderful that we had virtual options, especially to stay connected to friends and family, maybe a knitting group, maybe to watch instructional things, to keep us stimulated. But to me, we also lost a little bit, and we lost some of that kindness, a baseline of expectations of how people treat each other. And in the United States specifically, I think there was, regardless of what your politics are, politics also played a part in that, and it was kind of a perfect storm. So Knit Kind to me, as I've mentioned before, is a place for people to come together about knitting under the premise of kindness. It doesn't mean I never have something to say that might be constructive feedback. It might be something where something's not my favorite, but the overall premise is come here with an open mind, an open heart, and show up for each other in a way that feels good. I don't want to put anything out there that makes people not feel good. So again, in this season where everything's so crazy, I thought I'm going to pause and reflect on some things this week, and I'm going to tell you a story after I show you my recent finished objects, and that story is going to be the story of a sweater. So stay tuned. What have I finished this week? Well, I finished my Ferguson hat that I told you about, and this is knitted in Treasure Goddess yarn that is a blend with wool and yak, and I think also nylon. In that way, it's similar to a MCN, a merino cashmere nylon. There's an extra level of softness, and specifically with yak, warmth as well. This is a fingering weight hat. I'm so pleased with the way it turned out. This has been blocked now. And I think it will just be so pretty for winter. And I have this Alpaca Pom Pom that I think I might have to put on the top of it. We'll see. I can't really tell if the color looks good in person. I don't know how great it looks here. But this is one of those pom-poms that is just so incredibly soft. And I would like to know a little bit more about how they're resourced. I've heard a couple of different things. And anyway, if that's something that you're looking into, you might want to ask that question of how they're resourced in terms of the alpaca and making full use of an animal when you have a farm. So that is one thing to think about. My pom-pom came from a little pop-up shop that was in my downtown last year. And if I can find out if they're still selling them online, which is where their permanent store is, I will link that in the show notes. So that is my most recent finished object. I did realize that I was going to show you my first full knit from hand spun yarn that I made, and that is a weekend Waverly cowl. So if you have been watching, you've seen the episodes where I showed this yarn as my finished object. And I since knitted with it. This is a pattern I've done a few times. I think I usually end up flipping it upside down. I will show you. It's going to go over my microphone for a minute. I'm really happy with this. I just wanted to feature the yarn, and I thought about doing 2-color, and then in the end I just decided I really just wanted to work with it, see what it was like to work with my own hand spun yarn, and in a color where I have a lot of things that this goes with. So this will get a lot of use, and it's very soft. It is a silk wool blend. The fiber was purchased from Dorchester Farms at Wayland Winter Farmers Market Farm Fiber Days. Gotten good at saying that one. And well, actually this is a little bit more recently finished than the other two, but it's not done. It doesn't have a pom-pom. It is blocked. I guess it's as done as the other hat. This is my pattern called First Flurries. It is a bulky weight yarn, but it has just that perfect squish factor. I used Barocco Ultra Alpaca is the gray, which is half alpaca and half wool blended together. And the raspberry color here is from, I have pronounced it Jagerspun. I've heard it pronounced Jaggerspun. It's Jagger. And it is a company in Maine. The fiber is sourced differently, and so it's not Maine fiber, but it is a Maine company that's been around for a very long time. They also go to the Wayland Fiber Show and are lovely to work with, and this is their Berwick Bulky, I think that it's called. It will be, if it's not in my Ravelry project now, it will be. And this hat pattern is a lot of fun. It's a fully reversible twisted rib here. So if you wanted to double it up and fold it, you could do that, fully reversible. And then there are sections of texture where you've got some purl bumps, really small sections of stranded color work, more texture, and then a quick closed crown, which is really nice, especially when you're working in bulky weight. I've knitted a few of these. It fits pretty universally. It's got some nice stretch to it. I have a kid's size version and an adult size version, and I believe this one is going to get a nice gray pom-pom on here. Not holding it very well. Little flare. I usually put my pom-poms on with very few exceptions so that you can remove them to wash them. And I think that's probably all I have to say about that one. I did originally design it in So Happy Jane yarn, so if you're looking for something to do with 2 skeins of that, it makes a beautiful hat. But really, pretty much any bulky, chunky yarn will work. You can hold a worsted weight double. It's another option, and you'll see a few different projects in my Ravelry page. So those are my finished objects. Oh, what I'm wearing. I am wearing the Vivy Sweater by Marie Greene of Olive Knits. I knitted this as part of a knit along one year. You can see it has the Danish stars. Maybe you can see, you gotta catch it in just the right light to see the Danish stars down the side. You see those? And then the cabling on the front, and it has the Danish stars down the back, and a single cable on each shoulder. A rolled neckline. The original is designed with 3/4 length sleeves. I did full length sleeves. And one of the other things that's fun to mention about this sweater that I just remembered is I knitted this in Stonehedge Mill, I think, fiber. They are based in Michigan. I discovered this yarn only by going to my local yarn shop. I had never seen it before online or anything. This one is a worsted to Aran weight yarn. They have a few different weights, a really nice variety of colors. It's very, very soft, and they are no longer wholesaling their yarn. They have a certain amount that was already spun that they are still selling directly. They're not wholesaling to local yarn stores anymore. But one of the full circle stories here is that I recently was visiting Junction Fiber Mill. I went to one of their open houses, and if you watch their mill cast, you'll notice that they just got a piece of equipment that came from Stonehedge Fiber Mill? Stonehenge. Anyway, I hope I'm getting it right. I'm gonna double check and check the show notes. I'll make sure it's right. But I just thought of that story as I was telling it, and so it seemed opportunistic to share it with you. So going back to this whole bit of kindness and the season, and why did I impromptu decide to chat with you today on a topic that is, like I said, kindness with a side of knitting, and not knitting direct, not socks, not color work, not mosaic knitting, not that topic today. Well, as I mentioned, for me, this season is values driven. For some people, it's religious. And religion can be tied in, obviously, to being value driven for some people. It's also a season where you might encounter somebody, and I did recently at a rest stop, and this person was just so negative and so heavy and complaining about Christmas. And your first instinct, or my first instinct, could be, gosh, what a Grinch. Does this person really have to project on all of us how badly they're feeling? And then I took a moment and I thought about it and said, who knows what they're going through? Who knows if they are estranged from their family, or don't have family and friends, or are going through something health-wise, are financially struggling. Any of these things. And maybe this was the perfect storm, and maybe a customer had just been really rude to this person. I don't know. But instead of having that first instinct of, why are they acting like this to the rest of us? Well, have that moment when you say, maybe I can't solve this person's problem, but I sure can make it not worse, right? And make my situation not worse. I can do what I can to continue to spread joy and light in the world and not be naive. I think we all know how hard life can be, and hopefully can take time during, again, what I kind of call the season of gratitude, to think about what matters the most. And even if things might seem really dark, and I have some friends, I don't know if they'll watch this, but I have someone recently, I asked how she was doing, and she's not doing well. She has a lot of really hard things going on in her life and her family. And sometimes it's hard to know what to say to people when they respond to you that way. And one of the things you can do is just hold space. It's not go away and hide because it's a negative story or it's not the best thing. And you also can't solve their problem. You can't solve every challenge someone has. But if you can just let them know sometimes that you're thinking about them, that can go a really long way. So here's my story of a sweater. And I'm going to insert a picture because I don't have it to hold up, because after having it for many years, I passed it on last week, which is why I thought of sharing the story of the sweater. In my last episode, I talked about stockings, and I talked about how much it can mean to someone. And really interestingly, and maybe this is another reason I decided to record this today, on my local Facebook page for my local community, someone posted a picture of a stocking this week and said, these meant so much to my family. They were made by my grandmother. Is there anyone out there who I can either commission or find or have some agreement with to knit a sweater for, I think it was a daughter, in the same pattern that everyone else had knitted for. So I think all these things came together this week and just made me want to share some of these stories with you. So I had this sweater, and where did I get this sweater? Not this one that I'm wearing, this one I would be holding up to tell you about. Well, I've always been in a family where there's a culture of looking at yard sales and thrift stores and just having fun antique shopping. Just to kind of look around and see things. Like, we have an appreciation, I think, for artisan things, for really well-made things, for art. I worked in an art museum for almost 11 years. And we will have things around our house. Some of them were bought brand new. Some of them were bought directly from living artists. And other ones were found in antique shops, thrift stores, estate sales. And that carried through with me, I think, when I was younger, not so much with textiles, but as I got older and really understood the impact that the textile industry has on our climate and how awful it's gotten, and it's really in a crisis mode, and became a knitter and had an appreciation for fibers, I really started thinking more about clothing, and not necessarily for myself, although sometimes if it's a really, really well-made thing, but I started thinking when my son was little, and not just getting all of this stuff that we were not going to use for very long and not need. And don't get me wrong, we had more than our fair share of it, but there were certain things, like I probably, at the time he was little, before I was a knitter also, wasn't going to buy him a $200 hand knit sweater. Don't look at me like you're crazy or like I'm crazy, because would I now? Well, maybe in the right scenario. And do I have people who have so wonderfully commissioned baby sweaters for me and pay that much money? I do. And I think that is the most special thing ever. And seeing pictures of them wearing them and loving them and cherishing them. But what happens to us as gift knitters a lot, I talked about a little bit in the episode where I talked about gifts and Christmas stockings. And that is, we put love into every stitch and passion. And it's not about busy work. And it's not about making something that is totally just meant to be utilitarian. And it's also not meant to make something that's going to be so cherished it's never worn, right? The thing that a knitter wants to see is that enthusiasm for a gift and using it, but also taking care of it. So you don't want to give someone a wool sweater and tell them it has to be hand washed and have them come back to you and say, sorry, I felted it, and all that work was for nothing, or never wear it. Or, and this is where the story is going to go, donating it to Goodwill or a thrift store or Salvation Army, or that's the thing in your head that you're thinking, oh, please don't let that happen. I'm going to give you a little story of why it is okay not to fret if that does happen. And I sort of had somewhere else I was going to go with that, but I'm going to go back to the sweater. So my son's little, and we would go to the little consignment boutiques, and we would get some hand knitted sweaters. And those were ones that people had probably, if not loved themselves, and then still thought were in good enough shape to pass along, which they certainly were. They were at least ones where people appreciated what they were, even if they didn't wear them a lot, and then gave them to the consignment shop rather than a donation, right? And we would get some really cute sweaters from there. And then when I started knitting, I would appreciate them even more. I'm thinking of one specifically we got at a little shop called Apple of My Eye in Melrose, Massachusetts. And it was green and blue, and it had a big hood on the back, and you could put that hood right up. And I believe I passed that one on to a friend when my son outgrew it. And we had a few different ones over the years, and when I would be in thrift shops, I would often look and see what was hand knitted, and some of them just weren't my style, and I thought, I'm gonna leave that for someone else to discover. But there was one day, and this is when I had come a little further in my knitting journey, more of an appreciation of wool, the style of something that was really neutral and classic, yet also had a modern element to it. And it was this little sweater, and I think it has like raglan shaping to it. I'm gonna insert some photos. And I got it for my son and was so excited, and I took it to my local yarn shop because I was still a new knitter, but I knew enough to know, I think this is like nice wool, and this is not, an acrylic 1980s sweater like I had, right? And a lot of those do show up at the thrift stores too. And they're fun, but this was something different. And so we all kind of oogled the sweater, and then my son wore it. I found a picture of him the other day when he was, I think, just shy of 3 years old. I think he started wearing it I started knitting just before he turned 2. And I think he probably wore this from like maybe 2.5 to, I want to say almost right up until 5. It was like one of those 2 to 4T. Kind of slim fit. He's a slim kid, so he could wear it for a long time. The sleeves were long enough. And that was one that I washed afterwards. And I dried it, and I carefully stored it away, waiting for just the right person to pass it on to. And I have friends who appreciate knitting, and like I said, people who have commissioned sweaters for me. And I kind of missed the window because by the time my son had outgrown it, maybe there were a few people who it would have made sense for, but their kids were already kind of too far to appreciate it for the number of years. And last week, or actually this week on Monday, I passed it on to someone, and maybe we'll end up sharing who I passed it on to, but I think for now, let's just say I passed it on to someone with a real love and appreciation for wool, and it just warmed my heart so much. So maybe this goes viral. Let's say somebody out there knitted this sweater and maybe you have no idea what happened to it. Maybe you knitted it for your own child and donated it. Maybe you didn't have anyone to pass it on to, and maybe you're curious about where it is, and maybe you're not. And maybe we'll never know who knitted this sweater. And maybe it was a grandmother who is no longer here. Maybe it was an aunt who is here and was really bummed out because that person she knitted it for never wore it. I don't know the story of this, but it reminds me a little bit of the story of the traveling pants. This sweater, I promise you, whether you knitted it or you just like this story, or it's a parallel to something in your life of not knowing what happened to someone or something that you knitted for someone, this sweater is going to get so much love. It already has. I don't know how much love it got before us. It's been well cared for, and now it's been passed along, and it's going to get more love. So I hope that's a feel-good story for you today. I hope that it makes you smile. I hope that it maybe makes you think about where some of your things have gone. I know one of the, and where did I get it? That would probably be helpful. I am like 99% sure I got it at a thrift store in Saugus, Massachusetts. So our favorite places for thrift consignment shops were Melrose, Saugus, Danvers, Massachusetts. We do a lot of Martha's Vineyard, but I know it wasn't there. And now I'm Metro West, so now I go to some different places. But this was purchased when my son was young. So that's where I found it. Who knows? If you end up knowing the knitter or being the knitter, I really hope you'll send me a message, because that would be so fun. And, that's really all I wanted to share with you today. I do think, I don't know if I've mentioned before, but I'm also certified as a life coach. I have a history and a professional history that's kind of all connected, but at times it doesn't necessarily seem it. And one of the things that I learned through my life coach training was how much space and effort energy can take up. And negative energy and victim energy and conflict energy, it's where a lot of our world resonates, and it's really, really strong. And if you're someone who is, as I am, affected by the energy around you, you can feel like things are really heavy and really negative, when I promise you there's way more good in the world, and there's way more kindness and positivity and wanting to lift each other up. But it takes, don't quote me on how many times that amount of energy it takes to lift us away from the other, but it takes a lot more. So if you're having a hard day, try to find yourself some people to be around, or places to be around, or online things to listen to that are going to take you away from that, and be part of what makes the world a better place in your local community, in your country, your state, wherever it is. My son's school sang yesterday at a residence of people who are very vulnerable and obviously older, a much older population. And he's done this every year for 3 years, 2 years going to the same facility. And it just reminds you of how long and short life is at the same time, and also how you can focus on what's positive and good and not let the rest bring you down, because we need more positivity and kindness. So I'll leave it at that. Find something nice to do for someone today. Find something kind to do for yourself, and don't sweat the small stuff. Knit kind, be kind, live kind, and happy holiday season to you all.